Home selling panic has begun, and I'm going to share the one thing you must know if you're thinking about moving to or relocating to Florida ever. It's the one thing Florida residents want to ensure you know, but are very likely not going to tell you. Hello friends, welcome back. You're watching Chris Igoe. And US housing prices are likely to enter a long period of decline, as per advisory firm CEO Meredith Whitney.
Housing prices begin to a multi-year decade decline.
And just in case you have absolutely no idea who Meredith Whitney is, she issued a research report on Citigroup back on October 31st, 2007, to which many Wall Street analysts and media paid attention to. She noticed that the bank's dividends paid out to investors were greater than profits at the time. And she made the case that Citigroup would go bankrupt. And Citigroup went on to lose 97% of its overall value by 2009. She was one of the first to the market with the bad news about banks. Meredith's claim to fame is that she was extremely bearish on the banking sector before the banking sector collapsed. But she's also a little bit infamous for being what I would describe as a little bit early in regards to the housing bet. But she made a bold prediction in December of 2010 in an interview on 60 Minutes, where she went on the record as stating that 50 to 100 counties, cities, and towns in the United States would have significant municipal bond defaults totaling hundreds of billions of dollars over the course of the next 12 months. And while that obviously has not happened yet, and while her timeline was obviously not correct, there's at least one analyst that still believes that she is right. But that was then, and this is now. And right now, Fed Powell emphasizes the need for more evidence. Evidence that inflation is easing before he even thinks about cutting Fed funds rates. And while Big Papa Powell is waiting for proof of life, or maybe proof of death, proof of life in the economy, and I suspect proof of death of the cancerous inflation that is inherent in the system, David Einhorn of Greenlight Capital thinks inflation is accelerating and has accumulated a very large position in gold. Meanwhile, Amazon cuts hundreds of jobs in iCloud computing, and a hedge fund manager who has been shorting Tesla aggressively since 2020 thinks that Tesla could go bust. Now, you may be wondering, what does this have to do with the Florida housing market? And frankly, I'm wondering the exact same thing. I kid, I make a funny joke. But the housing market is no laughing matter. In the last 24 hours in Palm Beach residential real estate, 207 new listings hit the market, and 31 listings were canceled. 88 residential properties in Palm Beach County closed in the last 24 hours, and 23 properties left the market unsold. 34 properties went pending. 61 properties in Palm Beach County are active under contract, and 10 were withdrawn from the market completely. And I suspect that those sellers are in a panic. So while nobody can afford to buy a home anymore, and you've got to be completely insane to buy a home today in Florida, somehow, some way, people just like you and me are buying homes every single day. And I read your comments. Some of you prefer to rent rather than overpay for a home. Shout out to Peerless Mike 1. And remember, always look out for number 1 and never step in number 2. But Peerless Mike refuses to step in the number 2. He refuses to pay $800,000 for a $350,000 home. But Peerless Mike 1, there's no need to be sorry. Whatever is right for you is right for you. And it's all good in the hood, baby. Meanwhile, in Florida's ultra-exclusive, ultra-high net worth billionaire bunker, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos just bought his third home, which will henceforth be referred to as the Tray. It's his third home in Florida in less than a year. Bezos purchased the home in an off-market transaction for $90 million. 90. But the home that he bought for $90 million last sold in 1998 for $2.5 million. I don't think for one second that he was concerned about potentially overpaying. In June of 2023, Bezos paid $68 million for another waterfront home in the Billionaire bunker. County records show that the property previously sold for $1.4 million back in 1982. But what Jeff Bezos wants, Jeff Bezos gets. And he went for the hat trick. He purchased another home in Indian Creek Village, which is the Billionaire bunker, for $79 million. For $79 million, cash green dividend. Bezos is in fuego. And while I don't know what that property previously traded for, I do know it was significantly less than what he paid for it. And while I know that most folks that I speak to are not billionaires, we don't have to be tech geniuses, we don't have to be founders of Amazon to spot the massive, obvious, long-term appreciation of real estate in the previous example or on any other historic real estate chart. And speaking of charts, I couldn't help but notice that the 30-year fixed mortgage rate is flirting with 8% again. And if you miss a payment on your mortgage, you will be in default and likely foreclosed on or forced to sell. And yet, while watching the All In podcast and Chamath Palihapitiya, Jason Calacanis, David Sachs, and David Friedberg, covering all things economic, tech, political, social, and poker, I stumbled across something too good not to share with you. Because what's good for the gander is not good for the goose. But don't take my word for it, take David Friedberg's.
There being only one major issue facing this country, and that is the federal debt and the deficit. We are increasing the federal debt by $1 trillion every 100 days. That number is not slowing down. The current budget proposal from the Biden administration calls for over $7.2 trillion to be spent next year. That makes the U.S. federal government roughly 1/3 of our country's GDP. The outrageousness of the condition that the U.S. is in right now makes it so insane to me that we are talking about any other topic like big agriculture or whatever other nonsense was being spattered about as important topics to this particular person. If every voting citizen of the United States does not recognize the severity of the deficit and debt problem that the federal government faces, you are wasting your vote. And no candidate is speaking to what is clearly the biggest issue of our time, and we need to address this issue headlong. So I don't care about this person or anyone else who's running for office that is talking about stuff that we cannot actually address and problems we cannot actually solve if we don't get our fiscal affairs in order. That's my point of view.
Got it. And respect for that. Can anybody win the presidency on a, hey, we're going to balance the budget, we're going to cut spending?
Nope.
The debt elephant, which will crush everyone, continues to sit in the waiting room, being ignored by most, waiting patiently for its big chance to break the system, just like it tried to during the great financial crisis. And putting that to the side for a second, shout out to PBD because the future looks bright. Which takes me to a phone call that I received this week from someone just like you who found me on YouTube, wanted to speak and hire me to help them find their dream investment properties. And I learned a little bit about his current investment portfolio, and more specifically, what he's looking for in an investment property, what his buy box is. And he floated a question that I want to share with you because I suspect there are many folks who might be considering this option, or rather this investment strategy. Because last year he bought a home in Fort Lauderdale and he loves it. And he's considering the idea of using the equity in the home to purchase investment properties, which might be a recipe for disaster if he's using his primary home as a piggy bank. And right now, almost every Florida homeowner, almost every national homeowner is sitting on a metric shit ton of home equity. And while home equity loans and home equity lines of credit may come with relatively low interest rates, and they can offer a large amount of cash as a down payment for a home, which obviously seems like a no-brainer, right? Well, not exactly. Because when you tap into your home equity, you're pledging your home as collateral. And pledging your property as collateral means it is at risk. So you must be aware of what your risk tolerance is. And I'm going to take off my realtor hat for a second and just talk to you as I would a friend. Do not pledge your primary home as collateral for an investment property ever. Well, let me be clear, because I don't want to speak in absolutes, and there are times when using your home equity for real estate investments does make sense, because it helps you maintain good liquidity. You won't have to use your personal savings or cash out investments. And HELOCs can usually be closed fast. We're talking about a week or two. But in order to determine whether this makes any financial sense at all, you need to consider the interest rate on the HELOC and the rate of return that you're receiving on the investment property. Because once you run those numbers, you will be able to see whether it makes financial sense or not. Because if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. And if it's not profitable, then don't do it. Which takes me to a client who took out an equity line on his 3-unit investment property and used that money as a down payment on a 9-unit investment property, which was absolutely genius because it greatly increases his wealth while keeping his personal residence absolutely safe, which is why you never use your primary residence to do this type of investment strategy, because it will have a ripple effect that could destroy you completely, just like it did the last time the bubble burst during the great financial crisis. Taking out a HELOC, it increases your monthly debt payments and obligations. You must be aware that job loss, income loss, or negative movement in the market could create a domino effect that causes you to lose all of your investment properties. And that absolutely will not happen on my watch, because I won't allow you to buy the home. And I never want you to lose any property. Never put your primary residence at risk. Never put your family at risk of living on the streets. Understand with absolute clarity what the worst case scenario could be before you take out any debt, to ensure you're in the financial position to do so. If you're thinking of buying or selling in Florida, just know we do business completely differently than anybody else out there. And it virtually guarantees you 2 things. 1, your home will sell. 2, you will end up with significantly more money, bottom line, than you could any other method of selling. If you must buy right now, or if you must sell right now, go to my website, igoehomegroup.com, and we can connect right away. If you find value, ding that notification bell, smash the subscribe button, max out South Florida living to the fullest, and until next time,